2009, the Nader-rezvani Institute's local community event. We're very excited to bring the women from the community together. So this is the first time the Nader-rezvani has provided this live streaming. Thank you to CA Technologies for hosting us. So we can be here and watching the event today, and also we'll have a live presenter here, which you will know a little bit more about her in a few minutes. So welcome everybody to this event, and it's also a way to get connected and form our local communities as well. So we're going to first introduce our host, Sinead Bergeson, and she'll tell a little bit more about Nader-rezvani and tonight's exciting agenda.
Just got promoted. So one thing was very evident at the GraceHoppers that have been at the last 2 years is that there's this amazing energy that's there, and then you leave it and you come back to your companies and your community and you go, what now? And what's next? And that was what happened with the Nader-rezvani Institute. They set up these they want to do these local communities that basically can take that energy, all those discussions, all those workshops that's happening that full week. 12,000 women last week, 12,000 women in one place. And what do we do afterwards with it? Where do we go with it? And with that was also, what about those people who don't get to go? It's not a cheap event. It's not cheap to travel to or the tickets. To take a little bit of that for afterwards. So we will be emailing the link to you as well for the live hosting for you to take back to your, sisters in your companies as well, assuming that hopefully it works, because it's technology, right? And speaking of that, one of the most well-attended discussions, and it was nearly like she had a fan club afterwards, and I was like hosting out, giving out business cards, and they thought she had a HR minder. I was like, no. Was Naveed's discussion about QA. And it was honest, and it was open, and it said, well, you don't have perfect code, neither do we. And so with that, we're going to have her, very nicely, thank you, doing her speech today. And then following that, take some questions, and then we'll watch the replay. And we chose the replay of Susan from CEO of YouTube, because we thought it resonated very well here in the Bay Area. But being a democracy, afterwards, we have 3 to click on and choose on. If we need to, we can click on one of the other ones. But let's see what the team thinks afterwards. Does that sound fair?
Sounds great.
Okay, great. And turning it over to...
Thank you, Sinead. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to be here after this event that we had in Texas last week. Missed some of you, but it was a great event. It was fascinating to see so many people, so many women, empowered women there. And there were a few men also, and I had to go and reassure them that everything's going to be okay. This is how we feel every day at work. And so it was a great event. This is the presentation that I gave. My name is nader-rezvani, as Sinead mentioned, and I work for CA Technologies. I lead an engineering organization. And the presentation that I gave at the GraceHopper conference was well received because this was about quality. And what I wanted to, technology. So a disclaimer, I'm going to start off with a disclaimer to keep everybody happy on the legal side of the house. Everything that I'll be sharing with you here is solely from my own experience and has nothing to do with the voice of our company here. But I want to start off by asking a question here. I want to know how many of you have been involved or have ever dealt with delayed or poor quality software? Anybody? Yeah, and you're about to release your software at the last minute. You find a late-breaking issue and you can't release your product. Or even worse, you go ahead and put your release on your site, wherever it might be, and you have to pull it back. Or customers are unhappy because you really didn't solve their problems, right? You release features and it wasn't of much help to them. Well, you're not alone. I saw a lot of hands here. I actually experienced that. And I wanted to just show a situation and explain the situation that I was in. I had the responsibility, I showed up in this organization and I had the responsibility of leading 2 separate product teams. Product A, perfect execution. It was a team that had completely internalized Agile process, for those of you who are familiar with Agile. And they were co-located, they were focusing on the right metrics. I attended the very first meeting that I attended that week, first week on the job, was the end of sprint demo for this team. A very small team, relatively about 30, 40 people, but they were showing what they had accomplished during the last couple of weeks. And it just blew me away with the level of attention that they had to details. They were talking about how they had actually solved customer problems, and they were talking about what they took away from last end of sprint demo, and they incorporated it into this sprint. Talking about metrics, automation, definition of done, all the right lingo that they knew about Agile. And so that night, I went home and I sat in my comfy chair and I said, if product team B is half as good as product A, I think I've hit the jackpot. This is great. But not so fast. Product B did not have a perfect execution, and I only had the responsibility for quality organization for product B, where product A, I had full responsibility for go-to-market on that. Product B was a legacy product. It was the bread and butter for the company. It had been around for 15, 20 years. Let's say that good hygiene was not the focus for the team. So over the years, we had built software features, but we really didn't pay attention to how we were building our features. And as a result, we had created a lot of technical debt. First week, again, on the job, the second meeting that I was invited to was with the account team for a very unhappy customer. And I was new. I sat in that meeting, and I was the only one with an action item, because my action item was to go find out from your QA organization why they missed finding this defect. It was just too much. I decided that this had to stop. And it was interesting because the players were different, but issues were the same. So every time I went back to my team, it was about, okay, how did we miss this issue? And what can we do to solve this? So we would do the gap analysis and add whatever we were missing. But there were so many different combinations that we didn't even know. So I went to the support organization. I went to all the customer-facing organizations to find out if we knew what are some of the typical configurations that our customers use. We had the data, but nobody had looked at it. So the third meeting for that week, I actually sat down with the account team, and it was really interesting because our chief architect was sitting right next to me. And I don't know if he was trying to be cute or what, but he leaned over and said, Naveed, you have a big problem on your hand. How are you going to solve our quality problems? And I had to swallow, and I had to take a deep breath, and I said, I'm not going to be solving your problem. We're all in this together. We have to own the quality of our releases. And in fact, right now, instead of going to my team and finding out why we missed finding this defect for this customer, I like to team up with you and go to the development community and say, why are we putting these defects in to start off with? Well, needless to say, I didn't make a big friend that day, but he came around. He actually was my biggest ally, and he and I worked together, and we said, what is it that is stopping us and preventing us from moving forward faster? And one of the things that we both agreed to, and the rest of the organization, we were having issues with quality of our software. We couldn't release on time. That team hadn't released the quality software, major version, for over 2.5 years. And we weren't really paying attention to what our customers wanted. So we said, okay, let's define an objective for ourselves. We want to deliver releases on time, on quality to solve customer problems. And we do have releases in flight. So the release that was supposed to get released in about 3 months or so, they were almost towards the end of the development phase. But they were having a hard time with automation because the UI had changed at that point, and their automation framework was all UI-based. And they just didn't know. A lot of performance testing, a lot of major upgrade testing were left till the end. And that's usually a recipe for a disaster, because if something comes up at the last minute, you have to do everything manually. And that really doesn't scale. So we wanted to make sure that while we keep the releases going, we want to make sure that we do continuous process improvement. And most importantly, we wanted to create a holistic quality ownership by everybody. So in a community where quality was not only owned by the QA organization. Well, that was easier said than done. The escalations were coming in. I think my record was 7 escalations in 1 week. And at that point, I knew this wasn't scalable. We had to do something about it. I looked like that gentleman right in the middle with the full beard and everything. But we had so many challenges. We didn't know where to begin. So we started with my buddy, the chief architect. We sat down, we said, what would be the top item that we can address? So this is how we solved our key initiatives. These are the operational challenges that we had. While being agile, defect resolution was left till the end. I looked at the defect trend, and a lot of defects were not really even being paid attention to until the last minute. We had fixed date for the release, but product management would come in and say, you know what, we need to make minor tweaks to what you delivered two sprints ago. And that was disruption to the teams. We also were leaving performance and other abilities, upgradability, installability, all these major testing until the end. And automation framework, like I mentioned, was pure UI based. So when you change the UI, all your automation is out the window. We had to, and I found out that actually the team had created a very solid automation framework that was headless, but they didn't have time to operationalize it. So it was sitting on the shelf collecting dust. Full regression was planned for the hardening phase. So this was the time that you're done with developing your features, and now you want to really stabilize the release. But at the same time, they had so many defects. They hadn't done all these really tough testing, upgrade, configuration testing. And they hadn't released the quality software for over 2 years. So this was a big problem. We had people leaving the organization, a lot of unhappy customers, a lot of unhappy engineers. And we knew that we had to fix the situation, delight our customers. So how did we go about doing this? These were the steps that we followed. There were so many challenges, like I mentioned. But we decided not to boil the ocean. We couldn't be successful if we wanted to attend to every single problem. So we sat down collectively and we said, what would be the highest return on our investment from all the items that we talked about that we could go and tackle? And we decided that automation was number one. We said if we can take the high priority test cases and automate those, we can not only run them on a daily basis and find defects early on, so build quality in, but we can shave off some time from the end of the release. And that's equivalent of a certain amount of money, dollars. So the other thing that we did, we actually identified the most critical challenge, which was automation, and made a compelling business case with dollar signs in front of it. I actually did the calculations and I said, okay, if we invest 6 weeks with so many teams, this is going to buy us 100 days that somebody would sit there and do the manual testing. And I put dollar amount on it, and I went to the product management team and I presented the case. I know the head of product management wasn't awake. I'm pretty sure he wasn't until I said, and this will save you $3.2 million. And all of a sudden he woke up and he said, Naveed, can you run this by me one more time? This was very interesting. And by the way, can you leave your analysis with me because I want to study it further, which I did. 20 minutes, it wasn't even 20 minutes later, I went back to my desk and I got a surprise visit from the head of product management, the same product manager, came over and said, this is really going to work. It sounds like it's going to work, but I want to make sure that this will happen and you can hit the target with the team. So what if we actually give you a couple more teams and extend the timeline to ensure that you hit your target? I was just like, okay, am I hearing things here? Because usually I hear do more with less. And now he was giving me more funding to make sure that I hit the target. And that's exactly what happened. So I didn't even waste a single moment. I started to communicate with everybody, every chance we got, in every town hall meeting, through emails, voicemails. We had signs all over that we need to stay focused, get this release out, but help is on its way. We're actually making commitment. We're making investment in the right direction. We also had to go back and invest in the skills for the organization. I had a very talented set of engineers on my team, QA engineers. They had computer science degrees, but they hadn't been practicing automation, writing code. So because we had to focus on the release that we were focused on, we catered lunch 2 days out of the week from 11 to 1, and we had our architects and senior engineers come in, talk about the new framework for automation, and started to practice on the code writing for automation scripts. That went over really well. People were getting really excited. They didn't have this opportunity. It was all about manual work up until then. And it created some healthy competition among different Scrum teams. I noticed while they were fully booked, they had to really focus on that release, but they would come in early in the morning to practice. And we weren't supposed to start on this initiative until after that release was out, but we were seeing the numbers were going up and people were starting to really get excited about this. We had to set goals, monitor, and evaluate constantly. What is our goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? And also measure things, because without measuring, you can't improve. And sometimes it felt like we were putting people under the magnifying glass. That was not at all the intent. We wanted to make sure that we take action and come up with some changes, because what we had was not working at the time. We also, like I mentioned, we needed to stay focused. So one of the things that we did was we said, let's do no harm. Going forward, put the stake in the ground and say, going forward, we're going to do things right. But in the legacy code base that we had, we said every time you touch a piece of code, if you're fixing a bug, make sure that you leave it cleaner than the way you found it. We had static code analysis. We were reviewing that to make sure that the numbers don't exceed what we had previously, because and it was hard. Just go twist and turn through the way we were accomplishing this. But we knew that if we stayed focused, we could just go up the hill straight, and it would be challenging, but still it wouldn't be that difficult. We had to do some unlearning. We had learned Agile the wrong way. Just because we knew how to spell Agile and we were all getting together once a day for our stand-up, we were not really focusing on Agile. We hadn't internalized Agile. We actually had that sign all over the building on learning in progress. We're learning it the right way. I had to bring people from product A that had the perfect execution, if you recall from that picture, and they participated in release planning, they participated in estimation process, and product team B, they actually went in and asked questions. So this cross-pollination to actually see how things happen really helped. We also made sure that development and QA were best buddies. They were talking about the changes that are being made so that they could talk about risk-based testing and things in that nature that was not part of the vocabulary before then. Gosh. And finally, we made sure that we marketed and showcased our progress. This was really important. So the very first defect that we caught by our automation, we celebrated. We had beer bash, and it was just a major event. And that little dashboard, some of the metrics that we were following, like I said, they weren't even supposed to start on automating, but we were seeing numbers going up. We started to look at code coverage. We saw, wow, we're really making progress. So this was huge to make sure that we really recognize the effort by the team members. And we also remember that we couldn't solve problems with the same mindset that we used to create them. That's really not going to work. So we always said, let's make sure that you don't create any new technical debt, because you have to pay for it sooner or later. So let me just walk you through the situation. I mentioned before that while being Agile, defect resolution was left till the end. We didn't know all the details about Agile. We just knew how to spell it. Well, we actually followed the definition of done, a lot of training that we put for people, a lot of metrics to follow. And I don't know how many of you have read the book, Death by Meetings. We didn't want to go with death by metrics, because I've seen in many organizations you create a lot of metrics and dashboards, and we don't do anything with that information. So we decided to really focus on the top 3 major metrics that we could measure and make improvement. Fixed date and moving scope. I talked to you about the product management team that would come over and say make minor tweaks. Actually send them through training, and that really helped because it took a lot of emotions out of the whole process. Prioritizing the backlog. If you come in and ask for something else, okay, if this is more important than everything else that you have on your backlog, something else is going to drop. Automation framework relied heavily on UI. We actually invested in a solid automation framework and operationalized it. Hardening phase, the back end of the release was more than 5 months for that release. We kept on running into issues because everything was manual. It took a long time. We brought it down to 3 weeks consistently. In fact, after the 3rd release, we came in early one day and we celebrated. The celebration was a big thing for us. We hadn't released the quality software for 2 years, and we had predictable release cycles. And customers were much happier. They knew what to expect, when they should expect a new release to come out. We had frustrated team members and unhappy customers. We brought in the voice of the customers. We established a lot of processes internally to where we actually were solving their problems. We were listening to them. And as an end result, we had happier customers and happier engineers. So let me just summarize the steps that I went through, first of all, and this could apply to anything that you are trying to revamp in your organization, start from scratch, or modify. Somebody at the GraceHopper conference came up to me and said, those steps that you summarize for us, I can use it in my personal life. These are really effective. Prioritize, don't get overwhelmed. Make a compelling business case to the stakeholders with $. Anything that you do, quantify it, because at the end of the day, everybody will be asking, what's in it for me? Over-communicate objectives and ensure ownership by all. This is really not an issue that one person or one team has to solve. It's the whole organization that need to come together and solve that problem. Keep the business going while transforming and do no harm. Don't create any more technical debt going forward. Set goals, measure, evaluate, and adjust, then take action. This is really important. If you don't measure, you can't improve. You don't know how much to improve. Transition to Agile or scaled Agile framework. Train teams and attract talent to build teams with required skills and empower the team. Once you have trained them, once you have unblocked them, get out of the way. Team members really know what to do. Empower them. Self-directed teams. This is what Agile is all about. Create minimum set of standard metrics to track progress. Again, don't overwhelm the organization, but make sure that everybody knows what the goal is, what you're accomplishing, and track against it. Celebrate wins against set objectives. This is really important. And at the end, remember that you can't solve problems with the same thinking that you use to create them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for me? Did it make sense? Did it resonate with anyone? Yeah? Yeah?
And like you said, it can apply to any big initiative changes also. Like I am a change manager at Cisco, and I can see it applying even for services, not just for software. Or
Exactly. For everything that you do. That $sign does wonders.
That is right.
Yeah.
Jenny, you had a question?
Yeah, I was wondering, when you applied all those, how long did it take you to get from the very beginning to the end, when you get Team B to where they get?
Within 3 releases, so it was the releases of about 6 months, so a year and a half. That was the journey that we took. But along the way, we were getting a lot better. But to get to the predictable cadence and exactly know what we're doing, that's how long it took.
Thank you.
Yes?
I'm Hilda's guy. Can completely relate to your story about unlearning and breaking old habits. What were some of the entrenched habits that you encountered in the team that was working on product B that you had to change?
It was the mindset, actually. One of the things that we brought in the picture was the voice of the customers. So we invited customers to come in and show us, like I mentioned, the product was highly customizable. We didn't know how they could use whatever technique they wanted, however way they wanted to configure the product. So we had once a month, we had a WebEx session with different customers, and they would maneuver through our application. Show us how you use this product in your organization. And we used that scenario to create test cases internally to make sure that we're hitting those points. So that was one of the things that we did. And the other thing was definition of done is very important for Agile. So what goodness looks like before you actually start attacking any problems. Define what goodness looks like and then track against it. And at the end, if you're done, are you really done? Because you haven't really hit all the steps. Anything else?
So,
Yeah.
did you have challenges with meeting deadlines that were unreasonable and then follow this at the same time? Meeting good quality?
Yeah. But I think one of the things that we did with the training for the whole organization, especially product management organization, was the prioritization. So this is your backlog, prioritize it. But if we're agile, we can incorporate change as long as you're okay with dropping something else from the plate, right? So it's doable, but you need to be okay with the outcome. Otherwise, we would have that healthy, very healthy discussion on, okay, which product owner, and the worst thing was when you had competing priorities, right? So product owner 1 would want this feature to go out, product owner 2 wanted another feature, and we would send them back to the room and say, go talk among yourselves, come back, because the engineering organization will do the execution. We worked very closely, and so the estimation was very important. Do we really understand all the requirements? And that really helped us to get there. Yeah.
So in that process, who ended up owning the project management part of it? Because you can do it if you spend too much time in making sure everything is represented in a task and it's properly prioritized, but it takes a lot of time and energy to do that project management.
Yeah. So once you have the set goal, so the question is who owned the project management, the overall project management of the project. Once we decide, remember that communication is very important to have set goals. This is the direction we're all going. So everybody knew this was not a surprise to anyone. But the way we were organized, we had Scrum teams. So we have Scrum Masters for that are assigned to that team. But then we also had an overall, for the entire product team, we had the project program manager to make sure that we are really going after end of sprint demos, we are going through the right ceremonies and such.